recognizable faces in the audience, but there's more of you that I don't know, and I look forward to spending part of the day interacting with all of you. As you can see on the slide here, this is going to be a little bit different when we're doing a panel. A little different than keynote, where you have slides that can guide your discussion. This is going to be a little give and take, and I'm still trying to recognize all my panel members here. One of it, this is going to be a little bit unique in that Lindsay Shaw is going to be doing this remotely from Denver. So hopefully there'll be no glitches there. Julian, we'll see how that all works out with that. That's all worked out?
Yeah, so the speakers are over here. I'm going to drop them right now.
Yeah, speakers can all come down to the chairs here. And so we have here, besides myself, just a little bit about myself. I was a professor at Boston University in a number of areas. I did most of my research around biofeedback and stress management. And we had a program in the medical school in mental health and behavioral medicine. Did a lot of that work. So most of my work has really been in the cognitive field, or what I'm calling today cognitive fitness. And I still do some consulting in high-performance sport. But this is the panel that we put together that are available to be here. As I said, Lindsay's going to be talking to us remotely from Denver. Peter is a professor at Rutgers University. He's coming down here. And then we have Amanda Fazio, who's here from Sports Strata, a consulting firm here in New York City in the cognitive field, and Christian Hassler, who's here from Deutschland, from Schweinfurt, Germany, where I spent a little bit of my previous life while working in Germany. I'm looking forward to hearing Christian's take. It's what I call kind of creative biofeedback. It's not biofeedback in this traditional sense. So that's the nature, that's the panel. Amanda, can you come up here, and Peter, and Christian? Process of elimination. Lindsay, we know she's on her computer coming in shortly. So here's our group. Thank you, and we look forward. Again, this is going to be a little bit of kind of give and take. Like to kind of have a kind of a baseball vernacular, have a batting lineup here. And what I'm supposed to do is since Lindsay has done most of her work in psychophysiology and closest thing to what the theme of this talk is, I was going to have her, since she's remote, to maybe take 5-7 minutes or so and kind of get her take on biofeedback and the work that she did at the U.S. Olympic Training Center, and to the extent she's using it in any way with the Cleveland Guardians the last couple of years. And then I thought that Peter's had some work in EEG work. He told me about his dissertation stuff, and talk about that and how he's evolved from that, because we just don't stick with one modality in a toolkit. And so Peter can give his take on that. And then I thought I'd have Amanda go, and she's going to be a little more diverse, and she has some wonderful slides talking about different approaches to dealing with cognitive stressors. And it just, one size doesn't fit all. We work with her. Then Christian will give us his take on what I call creative biofeedback, a different form, but it's a way of helping athletes in the recovery process and injury and other therapeutic approaches. So that's kind of the agenda here in our batting order. So if we can hook Lindsay up and let her rip away here. And so we might go back and forth on some of these slides. Again, it's kind of unconventional because of the panel nature, and I might stop at any given point in time and ask Peter or somebody else to make a comment on something.
Would you like to sit?
No, I can still stand.
Okay. Yeah. That one.
Technical issues always. Yeah, that,
Okay. Yep. This is 7, 8. Oh, that's another one. So.
Everyone having a good morning so far? Enjoying it so far? Good.
got some coffee and breakfast and ready to go.
Can't go wrong.
While we're waiting, maybe just take a few minutes to mention a little bit about yourselves, what you're doing, a little more than I said.
Sure. Hi everyone, my name's Amanda Fazio. I don't know if I'm on here, but my name's Amanda Fazio. I'm a certified mental performance coach with a private practice out of New York City called Sports Strata. And we really specialize in working with youth athletes all the way up to professional and Olympic level athletes in mental performance and mental health. So we are able to offer both. I was going to say, there it is. I had to hit the on button. I specifically work with Fordham University athletics and many college athletes, specifically working on performance anxiety, returning from injury, and cognitive stressors, as well as working with many major league and minor league coaches on motivational interviewing, which is a communication style to help continue to motivate athletes and help coaches communicate. So really excited to be here with you all today and talk a little bit about biofeedback and cognitive stress.
So well done, it's me. I'm Chris. I'm running Skill Court in Europe, and we do visual, cognitive, and motor skill testing and training. So actually we fill the last gap in this performance and therapy training to mirror how performance looks like on a pitch. So if we train athletes in the gym, it always has less cognitive load, less visual load, but once the players enter a field, there's a bunch of cognitive load. So we deal with this capacity you always got 100% capacity, and it's shared by your brain and by your motor skills, and we improve visual and cognitive skills. So all of your athletes will have more capacity for their motor skill, and that will lead to a lower risk of injury and a higher performance output. And it's actually the biology of every single conscious movement, because it's always the same. It's always perception first. Second step is dealing with this information, reaction time, inhibition, all that stuff. And step number 3 is the original motor skill. But if you consider how most facilities work worldwide, it's always focus on motor skill and less attention to visual and cognitive skills. So we are sports and health tech company based in Europe. We got a brand new US Inc. So we are new to the US market, but settled in Europe with a little bit more than 400 installations in the last 2 years. And I'm happy to talk with you about this visual cognitive motor skill testing and training for rehab and performance. So thank you, and have a chat afterwards.
Peter, you're at the end of the line here.
All right, good morning. I'm Pete, Dr. Pete, and I am a professor at Rutgers University, where I do research in multicultural psychology and a little bit of MRI work, just getting into, and I'll talk a bit about that. I am the director of behavioral health and sports psychology there and at some other universities, so it's part of my consulting work is just helping people work through the blend of pathology and performance. So I'll talk to you a bit about that this morning.
Okay, while we're pretty good shape for time, so we're not too worried. But we may change batting order just to speed things up here. So Peter, why don't you go and share with the audience kind of the work you do in the cognitive domain that kind of helps manage the stressors that kind of preclude the issues surrounding mental health disorders.
Perfect. All right. So because the room is a little warm and because you've been sitting there, just do me a favor and entertain me for a moment. Just stand up. It's also part of how we can work with our cognitive focus and biofeedback. So we'll just stretch for a moment. And so what I do is also mindfulness, which I didn't even say that. So I've written some books and some research on the world of mindfulness, which now, by a show of hands, who's heard of mindfulness? So when I started doing this about 15 years ago, nobody would have raised their hand, or maybe 2 or 3 of you. And it was kind of a weird thing. And so what we're going to do is maybe just stretch up a little bit, maybe twist a little bit, kind of get some movement in, get your blood flowing. And then find your center, and then close your eyes and take a deep inhale. And as you inhale, imagine there's a big balloon in your belly. And as you exhale, bring your belly button back towards your spine. And with your eyes closed, just play with your center of gravity for a moment. Maybe lean forward and backward and left and right. And see how you can kind of take yourself off. Feel a little imbalanced. And then settle back in that middle. Notice how your feet feel on the ground. This is a grounding technique of noticing your left foot and then your right foot without judgment. Letting go of any distractions that's around you. And deep inhale and exhale. So together, let's just take one more deep breath like that. Big inhale. And exhale, your shoulders fall away from your ears, settle back in, and when you're ready, you can stay standing or sit down. And so I'll talk a little bit about, as Len said, it's interesting because when I was selected to kind of come into this, one of the things that I write about with mindfulness is that you don't need fancy equipment, even though we're in this tech summit, and you don't need a very expensive membership. And so it's something you can do no matter where you are at any given point in time. And about 15 years ago, I was doing biofeedback for identity development. And so we worked across multiple marginalized groups, and we measured EEG, skin conductance, heart rate variability, the stuff that we now read about. And so, with some equipment and to see how color of skin impacted skin, because what we know from the biofeedback is that as it's elevating, cortisol, sympathetic nervous system, those things that create stress. In the 80s, we had the stress kills, work. It's true. Stress does kill. And so we have to focus on staying well and balanced. And so that balance we can create, but it takes a lot of work to do that. And so the technology that we're learning about here can help, and we don't always need to have that. And so what we found in that original research was with my mentor across color of skin. So we worked with African American groups to see how the darker the skin, the higher the responses to discrimination. We worked with learning disabled individuals, LGBTQ, Hispanic, and looking at these different groups and how, as a response to prejudice and discrimination, their cortisol, sympathetic, were elevating. And that kind of contributes to the research around cardiac issues or hypertension in these groups. So when you are having chronic exposure to prejudice and discrimination, you will feel and have higher levels of physiological responses. So through that, we're able to say, hey, okay, cool. Now can we teach people how to then activate their parasympathetic so that they can stay more relaxed? And that's where, enter mindfulness. And so in doing this research now, about 15 years ago, I met my Zen teacher, and that's kind of how I got into this. So I do a lot of the, compassion-focused, ACT, acceptance commitment therapy, motivational interviewing, like Amanda said she'll talk about. As a board-certified cognitive behavioral therapist, these are the type of interventions we use. And so I reluctantly, when I came to Rutgers 5 years ago in the faculty role, I reluctantly began to call myself a sports psychologist. So I had been doing that work for a long time, and the reluctance is a long story, but that's just my own issue. But knowing that we can take these clinical interventions and apply them to, a group of high performers, and that's ultimately what we see. And I know Amanda will talk about that because that's a lot of what her practice does. So it doesn't only have to be athletes; it could also be other groups. So I work with a lot of CEOs, CFOs, executives that are in high stress positions. So what we do now is just teach about mindfulness, teach about well-being. And again, you don't need it, but like just in my book bag in my car was an oximeter, like a pulse oximeter. Sometimes I'll just throw this on the finger of somebody. Because what you can, the athlete in me is every time I go for my annual physical and I'm hooked up, I'm like competing with those numbers, and I'm gonna get you down. Because you can, because that is the power of what we can do physiologically to lower our pulse, lower our heart rate. And it's really cool to watch athletes like with something as small as this, they can just see that they can do that because as we know from the science with Yerkes-Dodson's performance curve or any kind of optimal stress, if I'm too stressed, I'm underperforming, and if I don't have enough, I'm underperforming. And so I think mindfulness helps because it's this middle path thing of finding this balance of optimal performance, and we can train our brain to get there. I could keep going or I can end. I think that's around 5 or 6 minutes.
That's good.
Okay.
Dr. Pete, thank you. Wonderful kind of overview of what you do and kind of how it contributes to the overall field of cognitive mental health. So Lindsay's with us now, and she's live in Denver, and only took us about 10 minutes to get her on. She's ready to go. So Lindsay, show us your slides and tell us a little bit of what you're doing.
Sure, thanks, Len. Well, first of all, thanks, Julian, and thanks for hosting this, and Len, thanks for including me in the panel. I guess by the way of background, when I was about 16, I knew I wanted to be a sports psychologist, and someone introduced me to Len Zykowski, and I thought, like, I'm going to be you when I'm older. I'm just going to be the female version. So I knew from an early age that I wanted to get into sports psychology, and I was lucky enough to do my master's and my doctoral degrees at Boston University. And at that time, Len had equipment, psychophysiology stuff, biofeedback, neurofeedback stuff. He brought in people to train grad students who were interested. So I had this early exposure to something that has become I guess, a professional passion of mine. If you're a sports psychology master's or doctoral student, you'll learn these skills that you're supposed to be teaching to athletes, like muscle relaxation and imagery, and you're not so swift, and you're trying to teach these things. And I would often wonder, like, what if they think they're doing it, but we're not really doing the thing we're supposed to be doing, right? Like, we all know this. There's someone you say, relax, and they're like, I'm relaxed. And, like, there's got to be a better way. And I was in grad school in the early 2000s, and this was when psychophysiology monitoring was taking off in Europe with European football clubs, with AC Milan and Chelsea Football Club, and I was really interested in that, and Len encouraged me to do my dissertation research using psychophysiology, and that's exactly what I did. And by way of luck, the U.S. Olympic Committee was hiring someone right after the London Olympics to do sort of a one-year stint, a proof of concept, to see if psychophysiology would be, of interest to Olympic athletes. So I moved down to Colorado Springs and started a lab, and a decade later, after the Tokyo Games, I said, okay, it's time to move on, and now I work in professional baseball. But I think for me, athletes are very devoted, and they have very, very highly trained coaches to teach them how to do something with their body, right? Like, so how to manifest a skill in the world, and there's usually not a lot of instruction about how to manage the interior of what's going on. So I just heard the last sort of couple comments for the previous panelist. I mean, we all know about sympathetic activation, and some sympathetic activation is good, but we all have scenarios where too much is too much, right? The heart is beating too fast, there's a little bit too much excess muscle tension, maybe the palms are a little too sweaty, there's a little bit of excessive communication between the outer layers and the deeper layers of the brain. It's simply too much. And some people maybe naturally are able to regulate that, or through trial and error figure out how to regulate that. And others, maybe they don't have that same edge, and it could be useful to have a teacher to help them. So the beauty of psychophysiology, which is biofeedback and neurofeedback, is that's exactly what it is. I'll show you some slides. Okay. Let's put it in 10%. There we go. Okay, so this was a lab when it was under construction in, I guess it was like 2014. And I believe someone else has shown other slides. You need, usually a place for the athlete to sit or stand. You need equipment, and then maybe like a little desk to put it on. And then you need a person. Like, a weight room is just a weight room, and it only has weights, but it's a place where athletes go to get stronger when there's a person in there who's knowledgeable about, what should we do with the weights? Depending on the sports, you can get out of the lab. Like, here's me working with a shooter. We had several shooting ranges on complex at the Olympic Committee. So she has muscle sensors because we wanted to look at for like consistent muscular activation during her hold period. And I think she might have some brain sensors on. She has a breathing belt and heart rate monitor on, because we're trying to see, really what's going on. Now, she's an expert, so the goal is really just to capture what's happening and then look for repeated activations. Or when there is something different, to ask her, what is going on there? And she might say, my hold was a little bit, it had too much movement, so I was trying to compensate, but maybe I was exerting too much muscular effort. Here she is. And the sensors are getting better. There's a lot of wireless sensors. This was more than a decade ago. Here's me with another athlete. You can see those like the red and yellow cap. There's these swim caps. So you can put like a swim cap full of sensors on the head, and you sort of do like an EKG, but for the cortex, and you can look at the way neurons are firing, and you can do either just an assessment for that, or you can start to do interventions for that. You can also just put one sensor, and there's a lot you can do with just one site of training in the brain. For those of you who are interested in this and maybe want to dip your toe into psychophysiology or biofeedback, there's great literature on heart rate variability, and all heart rate variability is, there's clearly a large assessment body of literature, but the intervention is just pairing breathing, the cardiac and the respiratory system. So the anchor of attention is on respiration, such that you usually inhale for 5 seconds. So in, 2, 3, 4, 5, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you do that, sort of slow and steady, you usually breathe in such a way that during the inhale, the heart rate starts to increase, and during the exhale, the heart rate starts to decrease, and that triggers a parasympathetic response. So basically, here's just an example of a publication where they did one trial, one negative intervention with breathing with Chinese Olympians, bobsledders, before bed, and then they looked at sleep outcomes, and there was like improvements of sleep efficiency, an increase in deep sleep percentage, a decrease in light sleep percentage, and a change in the profile, certain negative aspects of the profile mood state. So, like, hey, great intervention. But even just like on PubMed, you can find a lot. I'm going to stop talking there. If we want to come back to, like, well, what does it look like? If you were doing an assessment, yeah, you have a lot of data, but, just the top two are it's just muscles on the upper trapezius, just between resting and task states, and then it's breathing, and then it's heart rate, and then it's electrodermal, like sweat at the palm, and peripheral temperature. I will stop talking now and see if, Len, you have any redirects, or we're moving on.
I'll come back to you. No, let me turn this thing off. I'll come back to you in a bit, Lindsay, but I think we'll just kind of change gears now. Have Amanda talk for a few minutes on her work, and then we still got Christian to go.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Lindsay. It's super interesting. I think, one of the things I said to Len was, well, a good part about coming here is, like, I learn things too, right? And we all kind of learn from one another. I have a couple slides, but it's really not a big deal. They can't come up because both Lindsay and Pete have already been kind of giving a little bit of headway into what this actually looks like. And so in my work, so like I said, I'm a certified mental performance consultant, meaning that I do a lot of workshops, but also one-on-one work in providing these interventions for athletes in a way that is tangible and something that they can really use and utilize. And so one of the things that came up already was this Yerkes-Dodson curve, which is basically showing, a crash course a little bit in psychoeducation and how we understand it. And so essentially what we're trying to do is in any, I have a lot of athletes that may come through the door that are struggling with the dreaded word, the yips, or just a high level of physiological arousal. And so specifically, the number one thing doing first, which I thought it'd be helpful to give you all a little crash course in today, is try to provide them information of what's actually going on in their body while simultaneously getting feedback from them about what's going on. And so we know that there is a threshold for everybody that might look a little bit different. But there's going to be a certain level, like Lindsay said, where we're all going to have some sort of physiological arousal that's going to aid our performance, followed by somewhere we talk about going to the right of the curve, if we think of a basic bell curve, where we're going to be too stressed, right? Where we're going to be experience too much arousal, right? And so that might look different for each athlete. I like to describe it as, if I'm looking in a really simple way, from 0 to 10, and what that might be for every athlete. 0 being, I'm completely the most laid back, I perform best when I'm completely laid back. I like to pick on some of my baseball players that I have when talking about that one. All the way up to a 10, that is, I play my best when I'm pretty activated, right? I need to have that level of physiological arousal in order to perform well. And so I ask, where do you think you are, right? And even everybody sitting here, from 0 to 10, right? I could say I perform best at a 6, and somebody else could say they perform best at a 4, right? And so we need to understand kind of where we're falling, and certainly data and raw data, just like what Lindsay was just showing, can help us understand that better and kind of bring it all together to bring it full circle. But in order to understand where we're at, a football player, for example, a quarterback, is also positionally going to need to probably not be at a 10, right? I'd be surprised if a quarterback told me that they were at a 10 when they perform their best, because they have to analyze, they have to see the field, right? They have to make quick decisions. Whereas an offensive lineman, he might be at a 10 or an 11, right? Because he has to hit somebody in front of him as hard as he can. And so how can we better train ourselves to not necessarily not experience stress, right? I have athletes all the time that come in and they're like, I don't want to be stressed anymore. I just want to feel good, right? And the very first thing that unfortunately sometimes I feel like comes out is, you're going to be stressed, right? Like there's a certain level of stress that's good for us. However, if we can understand where we're going to experience that optimal level and when we're getting to the right of the curve, when we're really pushing ourselves over the edge, we can understand how to bring us back. And my work and some of what Pete was referring to is really in how do we get back to that place? How do we get back to our 6? And there's a great image of just how we actually do that in a lot of ways, and I'll speak specifically to the yips, for example. In many ways, we're talking about using skills like routine building, using things like imagery and mindfulness to be able to help train athletes to come back and really kick in that parasympathetic nervous system. And I think the one thing that I know I'm really passionate about in my work and at Sports Strata at our private practice is actually understanding the intersection of mental health and mental performance. And so for a lot of athletes that come through the door, they may be experiencing something that is debilitating in other areas of life as well. And so that would kind of turn us to the mental health side, right, which might involve diagnosis, but at the same time, right, it's not a clear line of one or the other. And so teaching skills like routine building and utilizing imagery and mindfulness are really simple ways to, just like Lindsay was speaking to as well, to start to not just help an athlete on the field, but to actually help them in other areas of life, right? When they go in and take a test, or they're going and performing, or they're in a job interview, or they're in a boardroom, whatever that might look like, is we're really trying to provide those skills and then get that feedback from them about how we can continue to enhance that. Because just like that 0 to 10 is going to look different for each person, the same way that the skills that we may use are going to look different. And the last thing I'll say is, there's really 2 different types of approaches I know that I've taken in my work, and many others have taken as well, which is we're talking about top-down processing or bottom-up, right? And in a really simple way, in a very direct way, top-down processing is going to be our utilizing things like CBT, EMDR, right? Acceptance and commitment therapy. So sometimes we think of those things as a little bit more clinical. They don't have to be. But how we're actually utilizing our minds to maybe appraise stress differently. Right? A lot of athletes coming back from injury might just have a huge benefit from appraising their injury differently. Right? And so that's more top-down processing. A lot of times, though, to the point of what we're talking about here today, is a lot of bottom-up. Right? So how can we utilize our bodies? How can we utilize our senses, our breath work, and more tangible actions to actually bring that in and pare down our sympathetic nervous system? And so
I'm gonna pause there because I know that was a super kind of crash course, and then turn it over so we can keep going.
Thanks, Amanda. Very nice overview of that 1 to 10 arousal curve, inverted U. It serves us well over decades. So I'm going to now turn things over to Christian, and you tell us a little bit about the creative forms of biofeedback that you do in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I would use the last 10 minutes. I just need to stand up. So what we do is like providing soft and hardware to test and train visual, cognitive, and motor skills. But I don't want to talk about how we do it, so we can have a chat afterwards on our booth to show you everything about LiDAR systems and soft and hardware. I actually want to share some insights why it's all important to focus on visual and cognitive skills for every single athlete in terms of injury prevention, in terms of rehabilitation, and in terms of performance. It's a pretty logical thing, but sometimes it's needed to be talked about it. Because, for example, if you perform something, the biological order of every conscious movement is always the same. We need to have information first. So perception is step number 1. 90% of the information we receive from external is visual. So visual training is all important for every single athlete. The more chaotic a game is, the more coincidence plays a role, the more important scanning or visual informations are, because we need to see that something changed. The second step is dealing with this information, like decision making. Once we saw that something changed, we need to adjust our movement, or stop movement, do something else, so task switching is crucial. And the original motor skill, we probably focus the most on our daily training, is just step number 3. So throwing, running, jumping, it all follows the same order. And just imagine you're able to improve your athletes by helping them to receive more information quicker and to have a faster and more correct decision making. That will definitely improve their performance and lower the risk of injuries. Why? Because just imagine if there is a lack of visual and cognitive performance, there's just one way to compensate it. So if I start running too late, the only way I can catch up is running faster. So I need to increase my mechanical load, and that leads to a higher risk of getting injured. If I'm not able to run faster, I will just lose the battle. Someone else will score. So the result is lack of performance or higher risk of injury. The second part is it's all a matter about capacities. You always have 100% capacity, and it's shared by your muscles and your brain. And just imagine you have your laptop in front of you and you're opening up 10 applications at the same time. They all share the same processing speed. So you open up 3 visual applications, 3 cognitive applications, and you get 4 left for your motor skills. Just imagine what happens to your athletes if you are able to close 1 visual application and 1 cognitive application because you improved. Then you got 6 applications for your motor skill. And that will lead to a higher performance and, again, lower risk of getting injured. If you consider how we train in a gym, it's not like 3, 3, 4. It's more or less 1 visual application, 1 cognitive application, and we can focus while we're doing a squat in the gym on the motor skill. But once you enter the pitch, there's always a bunch of cognitive load. It's fear of winning, fear of losing. They are exhausting. The special forces use the system once they are dehydrated without adding sleep for 24 to 48 hours. The German special forces need to prove with the skill court system that they are able to make fast and good decisions. And it's crucial for every single ball game or racket game whose game speed increase that much. And especially if we consider how rehab looks like, so that to add cognitive load on rehab is crucial, because it doesn't make sense to train our athletes without cognitive load, and then we want to perform them on the pitch with a lot of cognitive load. And so just try to imagine what happens if your athletes get more information quicker and have a faster decision making. And if you consider that there is a speed accuracy interference, which is actually quite logical. So the faster you have to do something, the more inaccurate it will be. So if you get more time for your motor skill because you had a faster reaction and faster scanning, you got more time for your motor skill. More time means you can perform more accurate, and also your biomechanical movement will be more accurate. So again, lowering the risk of injury. For rehab, we know that it's crucial. So every single athlete who suffered from an injury before, they don't open up 3 cognitive applications, they open up 5, because it's a lot more demanding for your body. So focus on this training is even more crucial than for a healthy person. In terms of injury prevention, feed forward is also crucial. So we often talk about feed forward activation intra and intramuscular, so with an EMG. So you want your muscle to stabilize your joints before the impact comes when you're jumping. Otherwise, it's feedback, and we all know, at least if you're married, feedback is sometimes too late. So we need feed-forward activation. And there is a small part, intramuscular, but there's also a big part, like driving in a bus with your eyes closed. The bus stops instantly, and it really shakes you. But if you open your eyes and you see the braking lights of the car in front of you, you can't stabilize yourself, so you see the attack coming. So that will also lead to a lower risk of injuries. Why is it so crucial and why is it so easy to adopt into any kind of elite sports? Because we don't add mechanical load if you don't want to. For example, the Premier League is interesting. Like I'm talking to Liverpool right now. They are just interested in the system because of their rehab medical. That's nice to have for them. But they can improve their players without adding additional load. Because within a certain part of the season, it's just performing and trying to recover. But this visual and cognitive training within movement, not high mechanical load, will lead to an increase of performance, and so they can easily integrate the system. For all of the medical departments, with our LiDAR system, so we are using LiDAR from autonomic driving and markerless motion capturing cameras. Within the next months, we integrate 4 stacks, like not just the specific walk ones, so 4 stacks in general, and pressure plates. So we have all of these medical testing from return to walk, return to run, return to play integrated, like all of the Y balance testing, jumping testing. So you don't have to set up a testing environment. Your players can just log in, we are palm weighing, and we are measuring everything, providing all of the data. And it's a bunch of data if you consider these visual, cognitive, and motor skill tests, like contact time, reaction time, also visual reaction, which is all important. We could show in studies that there's higher predictive quality in our testing and that we are able to improve players. We did a lot of science with the German First League soccer teams because they are linked to some universities. And I think that's, if you consider how every conscious movement looks like, it's actually a mistake not to focus on visual cognitive skills. And then the rest is just to think about how, because we know that if you are trying to improve your player by sitting them in front of a desk on a laptop or they're doing any kind of cognitive applications, unfortunately I have to tell you that there's no transfer into real life at all. If you perform on an application on a laptop, you just improve within this single task. So if you're doing Sudoku, it's great if you want to be Sudoku world champion, but there's no transfer to real life and absolutely no transfer to the pitch or court or wherever you have to perform. Because we need physical stress. We need these BDNF factors. And we could show that adding, like, we call it psychomotoric training. It's actually an artificial word. It's the combination of visual and cognitive training, that there is this transfer, because stimulus on the one side and motor function on the other side is close to what we want to do. So it's used in performance areas, in physical therapy, in rehabilitation, and special forces military. We are in WNBA, we are in soccer teams, MLS, German First League, Premier League, because it's pretty much we're dealing with people, and we help them to improve in their daily life. And daily life is different for an athlete. They need to score, run, jump. And soldier needs to perform under real different or difficult situations. But we also work with schools because we are able to lower the risk of getting ADHS because we are improving their concentration learning. So it's actually, we cover the whole field of the way people live, act, play, run, perform. It's the biggest gap. If you just open the door to your facility and you look around in your imagination, you will find 99% of things or stuff to improve motor skills. But if you remember, at least now, because I told you, but pretty much you knew that before, if you consider if there is any lack of performance in visual or cognitive things, you can't react on things you don't see, and you don't move if you don't react. Or just imagine what happens if you react too late or wrong. Because also that's a part, doing the wrong thing faster and more often doesn't make it better. So we need to improve on decision, not just speed, also quality. This is what we do. As mentioned, we are providing soft and hardware. Sold about 400 systems in the last 2 years in Europe. We got a brand new US incorporated. So I'm happy to talk with you afterwards. We got a small booth, some videos to show you how it works, how easily you can install it on AstroTurf, ice, court, because we are independent from any size and surface, so we are not time consuming and not space consuming. So actually easy to have. Thanks for this opportunity to share some information. I hope you could understand me. I mean, it's sometimes difficult to, if English is your second language, it's not that easy to explain it. And I hope you get everything. Otherwise, I got some more time at the booth to speak slower and maybe use Google Translator or something like that. So thanks for listening, and thanks for having me over here.
Thank you so much, Christian, and to all the panel members as well. We have to have respect for the next panel that's coming on at 10 o'clock. But I wanted to, following up on what Christian was saying, shameless to give a plug for the book I wrote that Derek Jeter, by the way, baseball pardons, published a number of years ago called The Playmaker's Advantage. And it basically is kind of a different take on what Christian's talking about. The first process is to see and search for cues to get an advantage, to get that speed, but it's cognitive speed. The next step is the brain doing the work. So it's the thinking process, and you want to do that as quickly as possible. And the third part is the execution part, the motoric thing that you're calling. Just a different language, and it's not German, it's still English. So thank you so much on that. And Lindsay, remotely, thank you so much for sharing with us. And by the way, we had some slides that might inform some of you who are more interested in the technical biofeedback part. I'd be glad to share that with you. And Julian has my email and my phone number. I encourage all of you to feel free to contact me if you want to know a little bit more about this area of psychophysiology, biofeedback, and managing stressors in your life. I'll be glad to share that with you. I'm not trying to hide my email and phone numbers and text numbers. So feel free to do that. I encourage you to do it. I enjoy engaging with people. Christian has the benefit of having a booth here, and I don't. So thank you all for attending, and I look forward to staying in touch with all. Thank you.